Welcome everybody to our God knows how manyth WSA Monday COVID call. Our opportunity to get together with directors and staff and parents and friends of ECAP and Head Start, Early Head Start, home visiting, to get updates and share information. So I will start with a couple of things for the week. One is this week we have scheduled a discussion and update from Cleo Rodriguez, who is the head of he's the executive director for the Migrant Seasonal Head Start Association, which is a national group. He's going to talk a little about what they're seeing in their migrant seasonal programs across the country. We have heard about all the challenges that our own migrant seasonal programs are having. He's going to talk a little bit about issues that are affecting their families and immigrants, and what advocacy opportunities they are pursuing and what might be needed. So that is on Friday at 10. Let me see here. I don't think we have a whole lot else scheduled. We have the Summer Institute starting next week. We're getting a lot of people signing up, so if you haven't done it yet, you should do it soon because I'm about to close some classes. So get them while they're hot. And because we don't want a million people in the class. So Summer Institute. You got the WSA Monday email this morning, and I would love it for people to continue to get families. And so all of you parents who are on the call, please share with the rest of your friends the parent survey. We want DCYF to have absolutely as much information as they can, and us. This is a co-sponsored survey between us and DCYF around what's working and what's not working, what you need as we emerge from COVID or don't emerge, as the case may be. So please do that survey. It doesn't take too long. It's in English and Spanish. Let me see here. So Joel, how about an update on all things governor's office, and
Sure.
and then I will give an update about childcare, and then we can talk about federal.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. Hope you're all doing well, and thank you for joining us. I think the first thing I would say in terms of ECAP is that we don't know when a special session will take place. Even the cat that now is hanging out, walking across Katie's screen doesn't know. But we think maybe August. They didn't have a bad jobs report. And I think the state lawmakers, they don't want to come in, nor does the governor want to come in before an election and make big cuts, nor do they want to raise taxes. So I think there's a little bit of hope of, will the economy improve? And will the federal government come in and try to bail the states out to some degree? So I think there's a little bit of waiting to see, what happens. So that's definitely part of it. The other thing I would say is if you haven't, I know a number of people have emailed me or Katie, that they've set up meetings with their lawmakers. Please continue to do that and talk to them about the work you're doing in ECAP. We got did you have a poll, Katie?
I was just thinking how important it was, and I thought, I'm just going to call them out. I'm going to see who has actually made the call so far. So yeah, there's a survey up there.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll do mine too, because I actually did my own people.
Although honestly, I should have put something that suggested that you haven't done anything yet, and I forgot to put that on the list. So you can do that in
No,
other.
because I know that wouldn't happen.
I
I know
I,
that would,
I know,
with
but
so much
yes, this
on the
is.
line,
I know we're
so
getting
much
so
pressure
fancy with
on
Zoom
us.
here.
Yeah. Well, I did mine because I reached out
Hello,
to
this
my
is
48
Marisela.
district.
I'm sorry, this is Marisela. Please go one at a time.
Yes.
I'm interpreting.
Yeah,
Sorry, Marcella.
And I'm putting,
yeah,
since I didn't
Marcelo,
have
we're
the
asking.
poll, I'm putting the questions in the chat for the Spanish, so I didn't have the poll.
Yeah, sorry. I just wrote it like 5
Okay.
minutes ago.
It was a good idea, though. It puts a lot of pressure on people. Let's see the honesty of all these citizens that, and especially with all the advocacy that's going around on a whole host of issues, including around civil rights. And this is an excellent time to speak up. Kelly Bohannon shared with me that the data they have now in ECAP is that 2/3 of the children and families that we serve are children of color. And for the first time, there is 39% of the population served by ECAP are Latino, Latinx, and 33% are white. So there's actually a majority now of people of color being served in the program. So that's good. Okay, seeing the scores come up. There's not a lot of people responding though, so it's hard to.
Yes, and so I think that the people who didn't respond are the ones who haven't called yet, and that means
Those are the
that
people that haven't called. Yeah,
yes.
right. You have an other category too that's allowing some escape hatches for people, which I
Yeah.
appreciate. That's good. Well, if you did do it, that's great. If you didn't do it yet, please do it, because, again, at the end of the day, people like to ask me, and I've had this ever since I worked in DC. Joel, tell me the strategy. What's the secret strategy? Are you consulting with pollsters? It's like, no. Constituents need to contact their lawmakers. That's the key to all of this, right? If enough people in key districts talk to their lawmakers, you share what you're doing, they're going to be amazed, just like we're amazed on all these calls, right? So that's really, it's just telling your story. And you don't have, again, this is a safe zone. If you're worrying about whether this is lobbying, you're not lobbying. This is all education. So even you reaching out to your lawmaker is safe territory. You're just sharing with them what you're doing. You're not asking for money. You're not asking not to be cut. You're not asking to sponsor a bill or support something. So you're actually in a pretty safe zone in terms of your legalities, if that's something you're worried about. But the more people who do that, the better, because we need them to hear from people in the community. Today, Puget Sound ESD and the Bellevue schools are meeting with Tana to share what they're doing and to have some conversation. And I'm still actively trying to set up meetings with some of the more key folks that'll be involved in the budget. But you also never know. That's another question I often get. Well, my lawmaker is not on any of the key committees. So what should I do? You never know. That person could have influence on somebody on the key committee, or they have a conversation, or you don't know how it works. Or the other question I get is, well, my person's a lost cause, so what good is that? Well, but there's a level of lost causeness, right? There's the Paddens of the world who can't stand ECAP and would make trouble for us at all cases. And then there might be somebody else who's sort of in the middle, and you've softened them up. And it's the other way too. My lawmaker already supports ECAP. Well, if they support ECAP, can they be a champion for ECAP when the budget is being looked at in a serious way, right? So, don't under or overestimate any of the people that are representing you, because they all need to hear from you, and they need to have these issues pushed to the forefront. So anyway, I know that's not why you wanted to join this call, but
yeah,
but
so
since
maybe
Katie did the poll.
Maybe this is a good time for me to give a little update about, so a lot of you directors were on the call last week with DCYF around the, what is being sent as part of the mandated cut exercise that the governor's office. So the governor's office gave an assignment to all of the agencies to come up with some estimates about how they would cut their budgets by 15%. In ECAP, At DCYF, they were actually asked to come up with 3 different estimates: a 10% cut, a 15% cut, and a 20% cut. And part of that is that, right now they've been asked for 15, but the budget deficit could be much greater. It could be many, many billions of dollars, in which case we might see estimates even higher. So they came up with some proposals to where the cuts included not having the slot rate increase, which has already been vetoed, which is a great cut since we already have mourned it.
Yeah, we already chopped.
Yes. The complex needs rate was cut in all of their scenarios. The admin for DCYF is cut in all of their scenarios. And the biggest things that are gonna affect us really is, we are expected to have 662 additional expansion slots this fall. The 10% cut proposal would have cut 400 of those. The 15% cut proposal would cut all of those, plus cut 500 existing slots. And then the 20% cut.
Katie, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Can you go a little bit slower, please? Because there's a lot of numbers and yeah, please.
Sorry. So the 15.
Before you go through it,
Go ahead.
Katie, can you, because I know this is something that they just made publicly available. Can you just explain where you get it, and can you send it out to people too?
No, I can't.
I got you.
They
Melissa said that
haven't
she-
really made it publicly available. Nicole Lohr, is it available publicly yet? So she might
take
come
that.
on, but the answer is no, they're not providing the details. That's why we're doing that verbally here on this call.
I
Hey,
got you.
Katie,
Okay,
this is
because I know
Nicole.
Melissa was
Yes.
waiting for-
Hi, Nicole.
Sorry, I was double muted.
Nicole.
I was talking. I've been only unmuted one thing, not both. I have not seen. I've been looking this morning for that information on the website and haven't seen it yet. But I'll continue looking and I'll let you know if I see anything.
Yeah, thanks. We'll send it out if they decide to make that public. So
Okay.
So again, their 15% proposal for ECAP is all of the expansion slots cut plus 500 existing slots. And then their high end cut would be all of those things and cutting 1,250 current slots. None of their proposals include rate cuts, apart from the elimination of the rate increase. Couple of things that I would, and then they made these proposals to DCYF, and then DCYF got to decide, what they were going to do in each of their various component areas. And the good news is that the ECAP cut that they ended up with for the overall DCYF proposal was more along the lines of the 10% in our of the options. So it would cut the 5% rate increase, the complex needs fund, 474 expansion slots. So so that's what's currently on the table, and that might be available online soon, that final proposal. One of the interesting things about what they said on their call was that they had to really rate all of their work under a certain list of criteria. Does this program focus on DCYF's core responsibilities as outlined in their vision? Does it contribute to DCYF's strategic priorities? Does it improve quality in intention and practice? Does it reduce disparities in outcomes? Does it have a solid evidence base, especially with WSA? Does it prevent children and families from penetrating deeper into our system? And really, when I heard them go over these criteria, I was like, this is 100% ECAP. So,
Yeah, it's us.
so I think that's probably why ECAP ended up on the, you know, on the, not on the very worst end of the cut, but a cut is a cut and it sucks. And right now, this cut proposal will go from DCYF to the governor's office, and then they will decide what they will include in their proposed budget for the special session. At least currently they have a plan to come up with a governor's budget for the special session, which is a little bit of a departure from the normal way of doing things. DCYF is also in the midst of their regular budget cycle. So, you know, putting together their proposals for the 2021 session. So that's a parallel process that's happening here. So this exercise is really for the short term. And we will see how it plays out. But you can see how no matter what DCYF or the governor's office decide in terms of these, none of it actually happens without the legislature deciding to make those cuts or not make those cuts. And that is why everybody who did not answer that poll should be calling their legislators this week and talking about the importance of early learning investment, or ECAP in particular. So yeah. Any questions about that?
Well, Katie, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Where is DCYF making the deepest cuts in early learning?
I don't know. Nicole, do you know that?
Probably, I don't know that I can have an answer, a good answer for that. I mean, I know what, I'm pretty sure what Kelly shared is that, you know, there's each and every program is making, you know, is going through this exercise and, you know, submitted all their information to DCYF. And I think we'll know more when that, the full proposal comes out. But yeah, I'm not, other than the only one that I've really been involved in at my level is ECAP. So it's, yeah, I'm not sure the information there, but as soon as, you know, we have it, I can share it for sure.
One of the things that they showed on the webinar, the DCYF webinar this last week, was and was something that we were afraid was going to happen, which is that when you are in a major recession like this and people drop off of the working connections list, then it suddenly looks like we don't need as much money for childcare, and the legislature or the governor's office or whoever it is proposes to count that as savings. Out here in the world of advocacy, we call that a sweep. They sweep that money and then they put it into the general fund, and you know, that's all you've ever seen about it, right? So I think that there's a very, very real concern that, you know, we'll see cuts in ECAP, but as people drop off of the working connections roles, that money might never come back in terms of investment in early learning, even though all these childcare providers are going under. So, so yeah, I just wanted to flag that as being an issue of particular concern. And the cat agrees.
The cat definitely agrees. Yeah, that's the terrible part about this, right? Is that I always look at the childcare thing, because it's always hard to explain how this all works and how many childcare subsidies that they have. But you know, they've always been sort of budget capped at 33,000 families, and I think they're, you know, as you can imagine, they're well under that. Some of that has to do with how many people they pay who have chosen to close. I mean, there's a whole host of other issues that I'm not going to spend time, because I know I'll get angry emails from the agency about, so I won't do that. But any decision you make now or in the next 6 months about this, as Katie said, can lock things in and make problems later on. So if you go and you start at 33 and you start looking at the numbers, well, there's only 20,000 families. I don't know what it is, but let's say 20,000 families. The state comes in and takes the other 13,000 family money for TANF or some other needs that they want to put into the budget. It's a lot harder when those families start showing up again, because then they're out of ice cream, right? You have all these people waiting. All right, the example I always give is the Cheesecake Factory, where you try to get into the Cheesecake Factory. Probably even now, it's probably the same, where you could wait for 20 hours to try to get in there, and that's what happened before during the recession, where they had a wait list. And when you're waiting in the Cheesecake Factory and you give up, you're like, forget it. These guys are never going to call. I'm just going to go across the street. And sometimes they budget that into their analysis, that if they do enough things to make your beeper not work, or it's hard to get through the door, they actually calculate that in, that fewer people will sign up because it's a pain. And they could do other things, whether it's call centers or how they handle authorizations. And I think our association, we've been, as you guys know, we've been working hard to reverse a lot of that and make it smoother for families and make it smoother for you guys. And but when the state is in a desperate spot, they'll do desperate things. But the challenge with that is it can have long-term ramifications. So we want to make sure that we monitor this very closely. I think all of us would agree that there's going to be less usage of childcare in the fall. But what we don't want to do is lock that in permanently, that the state says, hey, that's great, we'll use that money somewhere else then, because that money, it's very difficult to get that money back. Or they start trying a child support order enforcement, or they do other things to try to block the door from people getting access to the ice cream or food, which is, what we've been trying to knock away the last few years. So we just have to be mindful of that some of these things they do in the short term for budget savings can have lasting implications, right? Same with the complex needs rate. We fought for both the rate increase for ECAP, but the complex needs rate, because we were hearing from all of you that families needed more one-on-one support. There was a greater need for mental health consultation. There's actually a greater need for a lot of different services and supports for kids with disabilities. That problem didn't go away. In fact, in many cases, it may be getting worse as a result of the pandemic and the social isolation that people are facing. And there's just been tons of stories about mental health consultation and the schools. There was an article I posted on our Facebook page about not just the need for reopening in the public schools, but the public schools also hiring up more mental health. That's their advocacy. They're saying, hey, we need more support for people, more guidance counselors, more mental health supports. And I think that's true for us too. And so I worry that, I know the complex needs thing is a new thing, but the issues are old, right? The impact on you guys not getting the rate increase is a big problem. And then not being able to even provide some one-on-one supports for families, that problem just got worse, not better. So, we'll have to think through our advocacy. In the meantime, I'm just pointing this out, that any steps we take in the short term have long-term implications that we need to be mindful of.
So I have another thing related to mental health consultation, which is that we are working together with a couple of other advocates who are doing work specifically about mental health. And we had a call with them last week. This is Kristen Wiggins and Garrison, who many of you know. And they were specifically asking us questions about how support for children's behavioral health and mental health needs operates in ECAP and Head Start and Early Head Start and soon to be Early ECAP. And Joel and I were able to give them a overview of how we think that works. Sometimes I don't know if we get it exactly correct, but I would be very appreciative if a few directors out there or specialists in this area or people who know how that works in ECAP and Head Start programs would either let me know in the chat that you're willing to talk to Garrison and Kristen to talk a little bit more deeply about what that looks like in your programs, so that we can help them as we all work together on getting more funding for mental health supports for 0 to 5. So feel free to email me or write in the check that you're willing to do that. The other thing I wanted to touch base on here related to policy is we brought up last week that ECAP and Head Start are aligned in terms of not counting the COVID-19 unemployment bonus. Today we received an email from DCYF that basically outlined all of the reasons why it was a terrible idea to do the same for childcare. I mean, that's my interpretation. Anybody else who saw that email?
Yeah, I that's what I was taking away from it.
It was not really a strengths-based approach to this issue. It was basically outlining how terrible it would be to have to redo the computers and all of that, and how unfair it would be to people. It was so the so we definitely have an uphill battle, and this is really a specific problem for ECAP and Head Start and early Head Start programs who do programs layered with Working Connections childcare services, or also have childcare within their bailiwick. So we're still working on that, and all the advocates are super pissed off. So just a little update that things are going poorly. And so we may reach out to you to do some advocacy around that. I can see Nicole laughing there at her computer. But just want to be clear that the so far so not good on this topic, but we're still working at it. So
yeah, it's been hard, and I'm going to be very nice about it, but it's for a lot of agencies, lawmakers, all policymakers, it's still hard for them to move away from what does the new normal look like, right? So it's sort of like, God, you're going to mess up my computer system. You can't do all this. Like, hold on a second. Things have changed as a result of the pandemic. What are the steps that we could take? So just know that, I've raised this on a call with lawmakers around fixing this during the special session. Katie's been really active on this topic. Lori Pittman was, I think, the one that elevated this issue up around unemployment and stimulus. So just know we're working on it, because people shouldn't be punished for getting a little extra help during a pandemic. And we need to fix that. And I know that people at DCYF are wanting to fix it. I'm sure it comes with a lot of challenges and issues, and we need to think that through. But just know that we're working on that issue. That's on our pile of stuff.
Yep. Joel, anything to update on the federal end?
Well, the only thing I would add is we're continuing to advocate with the governor's office around CARES dollars, money for ECAP, to provide a modified summer ECAP opportunity. That would be specific, utilizing family support workers in a mostly remote fashion. And the governor's office is still sorting it out. We've had some great conversations with the DCYF staff that work on ECAP in the governor's office, and that's scary, Katie. And I brought this up with a number of our family support folks on our meetups. So hopefully we'll hear soon about whether or not some of these CARES dollars could be allocated to provide some summer options for July and August, which is our goal. So we'll let you know if something comes of it. I think we're trying to be hopeful, but it's a scarcity of dollars, where a lot of people are competing for the same small amount of money. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But we've gotten a good response from the governor's office and feel good about that, at least. I would say at the federal level, it's hard to get a read. I think there's three things going on. One, there are civil rights protests going on, and lawmakers are some of them are at least responding to that in a positive way. The Democrats are in the House are unveiling a criminal justice package. That's where the energy is, and as it should be. And so there's there in some cases people are being responsive to the protests. I think you guys are seeing on television people taking statues down. I think some of you have been involved in the protests. There are different activities here in Seattle where they're changing the way that they're treating people, whether it's tear gas or across the country chokeholds, things like that. But I think that's taking the energy and time out of, would there be another relief package immediately or not? I think also it's become more of a partisan issue. The Democrats have been pushing unemployment, childcare, a whole host of things. And the Republicans' perspective is, hey, let's see if the economy reopens. Let's move past this. So they're kind of in different camps, and that where in the first few months of the pandemic, that wasn't the case. There was a more unified effort to try to provide relief to small businesses and people across the board. So I don't know what will happen in terms of relief. There is some movement still on childcare. There are both our Senator Patty Murray has a bill for $50 billion, Child Care is Essential Act. There are a couple of Republicans, one from Iowa, another woman from Georgia who's running, who are advocating for additional childcare funds. Hasn't been a ton of talk about Head Start. The Head Start Association, I think they feel like their best chance is to stick with the long-term appropriations. So that's the third thing to think about, is that, just as Katie said, DCYF is trying to come up with, what's it look like in January? What are they going to propose? Lawmakers in the Appropriations Committee are still looking at the next fiscal year budget, separate from the relief package. And I think that's where the National Head Start Association is continuing to focus, especially on quality and trauma dollars, which has been sort of their main focus the last year. So that's been kind of their the way that they're approaching things. But I don't know, I don't know if we'll know more. They'll have a July 4th recess, and then there'll be an August recess, and then there's an election. It'll depend, will there be another relief package? It'll depend very much on, will the 6 Republicans who are in danger of losing their election want to do something, right? And so that's already happening on childcare, where there are two, the Republican from Iowa and the Republican from Georgia are getting nervous about their election prospects. So now they're more interested in childcare. That may happen in other places. In Colorado, there's a very contested race. A lot of you guys know in Maine, Susan Collins is in some trouble. So that could, politics changes things, right? So they could become more agreeable to another relief package, and that would include money for childcare. But right now, the energy is all around the civil rights activities and the Black Lives Matter movement.
So Joe, this is Rita, and I do think as we are reaching out to legislators, and not to inflate the impact that we have on marginalized communities, but I think this is an optimal opportunity for us to be talking to our legislators and sharing spaces where our work is closing the gap for those who are furthest from opportunity. And I've been trying to couch my language around our work to be inclusive of that. And as at the state level, while there are critical decisions that are being made right now around who to give or maybe shift funding from, and the kinds of programs that need to be funded, I think we would do ourselves a disservice. And again, it needs to be in a genuine way and not in a way that's overinflated. But if we can talk about our work with marginalized communities, I think there is some opportunity there to talk about the need for increased funding in these spaces, and increased funding in these spaces, and particularly to communities of color. And so I think that there's opportunity both at the federal and the state level for us to be able to show up again and offer some data and information around how we're doing that.
Yeah, I want to thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's an incredibly critical point and argument on this. And this is going to bore some of you, but now I'm starting to get old, but my college thesis, I don't know how I ended up now sitting in a car now doing Head Start advocacy, but here we are. My college thesis was on the political survival of Head Start. And one of the things, some of you have been around Head Start for a long time, some of you are newer. Head Start was really born out of the civil rights movement. I mean, so there's sort of like the data for today, you know, the demographic data. But one of the questions I've gotten, especially from parent ambassadors who are learning advocacy, is, well, why is Head Start a federal local program to begin with? The reason why it was a federal local program is the architects of Head Start knew that if they put money into some of these southern states, it would never get to communities of color. And so they purposely bypassed states to get out of this. That's why Head Start is federal local to begin with. It's actually, it was born out of the civil rights movement. And there were efforts in Head Start's beginnings where Southern governors and Southern senators would try to block Head Start money for the exact reason, because the dollars were going to marginalized communities, oppressed communities, people of color. And there was actually, Head Start was in the throngs of the civil rights movement as seen as a civil rights program in its very beginning years. Rika, you emphasizing the data around who are the families we're serving, how do we close the gap, all those things. It's so critically important right now to remind people of that. But it just sort of harks me back to, you know, the research I was doing when about Head Start's creation, how much it was very much seen as a civil rights program and initiative. And probably in some places it might still be, but, and I think that's true, Rika, too, that you're bringing up also about ECAP and Kelly Bohannon, and I know Nicole, you guys have been strong advocates and just pointing out the new data. And, you know, the reflection of who we serve is changed very much, just even the last few years, to reflect that. So anyway, I don't mean to, you know, it's not my place to start, but I appreciate you raising that, Rika, and others about these programs. And for those of you who are newer to Head Start, just know it was born out of the civil rights movement, and very much seen it in the first few years as a battle around civil rights, and also the role of how low-income people could have a voice in policy making and their child's education, which was at that time incredibly radical through community action programs and other things like that. So anyway, I'm sure that's not why you joined this call, but I'm just sharing that with you.
So there's some conversation in the chat about Working Connections childcare subsidy and how many parents are getting denied at this point because they're not working, but they can't start working until they have Working Connections childcare subsidy. It's like the classic scenario that we hear over and over again, right? And I know for a while they were renewing people, even if they were home during COVID, they were renewing without having to meet the work requirement. So Darcy, can I take from this that they're no longer doing that anymore? Yeah.
They're supposed to be. When did they send an announcement saying?
I don't know. I don't remember seeing anything.
So we've had 6 families not be able to renew their childcare subsidies, and they have actually been dropped from our program now because they can't renew it.
Darcy,
can you send us an
email?
Yeah, can you send that to us?
Send us an email and we'll send something over to them.
What are you going to do with those families?
We've asked them if they would like to still get activity packets every week and participate, or if they would like to keep trying to get their childcare subsidies. We're just trying to do what we can to help them, to keep them active. Some families have just said they're just done and have dropped, which is really sad.
Were these early Head Start or what?
Head Start.
Head Start. All right, yeah, so we'll follow up on that. Is it because of it's because they're not working, right? They're not meeting the work requirement. Do they anticipate going back to work?
Yeah, I have 3 families that are wanting to go back to work, but they can't because they can't get the childcare subsidy.
Right. It's
so
weird. The
right.
whole thing.
Yeah, it's a
so
yeah, that's
infuriating. Yeah, so,
Okay.
and Christy
Yeah.
Natchi says they've had the same problem and they're working with parents and communicating with DCYF about it. It would be helpful if everybody here who is having that same issue could send us some stories that really can illustrate that, because we can really start to raise this issue politically and put the pressure on from outside.
Yeah, well, like I said, we have a call with Tana Sen today, the chair.
Yes.
So
if you
I'd
can
be happy to
send
raise
this to us as soon as you can, that would be great. The other thing I forgot to put into the WSA Monday email was that one of the things that came up on our ERSI call last week around childcare subsidies was that there was kind of so people were having issues where the family was starting to work but not full time, and they couldn't get it's all very complicated. I think I was going to reach out and have somebody write it all down for me, but one thing they were doing was getting the subsidy, and then even though they weren't qualified because of the unemployment checks, but they could, because they were too high because of the unemployment checks, but once they go back to work, they can sort of do the backdoor thing and get reimbursed because of the income that they have once they're working. Do I have that right? Can somebody on the call who actually tried to explain that to me explain that? I'll have to bring it up again at the ERSI call, because
it might have been me.
Okay.
So my stepdaughter has 3 kids that are in early Head Start, or 2 that are in Head Start and early Head Start now, but 3 kids in childcare. And she was looking at the numbers because she's been working part-time, kind of off and on, depending on the company and what they have available. And if she goes to requalify at the end of this month with the unemployment on there, she would end up having to pay 100% of her childcare. Which means she wouldn't qualify for Head Start. Or she wouldn't, yeah, anyway. 3 kids, that's almost $2,500 in our center. So she went to her employer and they told her they would put her back to full-time, because when she's full-time, she won't get that unemployment, and then she will qualify. She'll have a significant copay, but she'll still get the subsidy that she needs to qualify to be in the early Head Start and to have the kids here. So, and I think they said they would readjust after she had been there for a certain amount of time. This was a conversation that she had. I haven't really gotten the full details on it, but it seems like as long as she had a letter from an employer that said she was going to stay on full time, that they would be able to make the adjustment to her subsidies.
Yeah. So thanks, Andrea, and I'll double check with the folks who show up for the ERSI call, and I'll see if I can get those instructions written, because I know there were a couple of programs around the state who were doing this process where they were able to get people qualified through this sort of weird loophole. So
right.
So,
well, and I'll talk to her. I'm sure she's going to touch base with her DSHS worker, whoever it was she was talking to, and see how it's going, because she should be putting in for her requalification sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Am I missing anything, Joel, or should we open it up?
Well, I know we have an exciting director's retreat that we're going to be planning very soon. That's coming the week of August 3rd. So we had several folks participate and some initial planning. So I sent out an email just asking for some feedback. So if you have a chance to send in, I know a couple of you done that, but if you have some thoughts or you have some interest in particular topics, or we're going to start pulling that together and putting speakers and creating some good, hopefully some meaningful conversations with peers. So if you're interested, please email us, let us know what you think. It'll be the week of August 3rd. So we're looking forward to that.
Yes. All right. All of you out there in the land of Zoom, what is rising to the top for you this week that we need to be aware of, and or that you need advice from other folks, or what's on your mind?
Somebody asked, Michelle asked, yes, yeah, where's it gonna be? You're gonna have the beauty of the director's retreat from your home. This is like, Sean Teague, 60. You can get the same exercise, but at your home without a gym membership. In our case, you will be able to enjoy the same. Yes, I'm going to miss the food too, Stacy, and I'm gonna maybe there's a way we can do something, or I can cook. Maybe yes, the cookies. I'm gonna have to make my own cookies. Maybe I can get a recipe from the sleeping lady that they can send out, because I don't know the logistics of us trying to send boxes of cookies out to everybody who registers. But I have thought of that at least.
All right, so Christy Walt says, we're having an issue with subsidies falling off from our center for the families that have had to find alternative care because we haven't been able to open yet. DCYF shared that both centers should be paid during this time. Is anyone else experiencing this?
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that this is going to happen more and more if families decide to stick with the other center eventually. And I would say that's my guess is that it's probably not going to be too far in the future. They're probably going to stop the dual payment. And Nancy Diamond says that they have had that experience. She's down in Vancouver. So yeah.
So Katie, this is Susan. I just want to ask a question. I'm hoping people will chat in the chat box a little bit. We're hearing a lot of interesting things about sort of where public schools are going to go. Like my school is starting to send out some information, and I'm kind of curious how we think that might affect the fall for a lot of us, because I know a lot of people are in school districts, and my ed director this morning asked whether we should follow what Seattle Public Schools is deciding to do, or how we want about optional planning for the fall. So I'm just kind of curious what other people are thinking. I'm actually realizing that the Seattle Public Schools probably doesn't have a contract. And on the call, I think it was Allison from DCYF had suggested that a lot of these contracts are going to get bargained, and so they may get done really late, and we may not know very much information until right before school starts.
So Susan, when you say you follow what the schools are doing, what does that mean to you?
So for Seattle Public Schools, they gave 3 options that are available to us that they're thinking they're going to do. And they have suggested they're going to announce before the end of the school year what their option is that they're picking. And I'm assuming that the reason they're doing it is because they're going to have to bargain this summer with the teachers on how that's going to look. So they have 3 options that they're proposing. One is 100% online, 100% in person for K-5, and then hybrid for middle and high school on an A-B schedule. And then the third option is all kids are on an A-B schedule. I think those are the 3 options that have been proposed, if I'm remembering correctly. So I'm just kind of wondering what other districts are saying. My school district is suggesting all in person, all remote, or hybrid in the middle, an A-B schedule. Monday, Tuesday, kids go to school. Wednesday, Thursday, another group goes. And then Friday, everybody is remote. So that's kind of what, and so I'm just kind of curious how people are planning for the future as they're thinking about whether school opens or not. Because we know that depending on how schools open in the fall will impact our staffing for the fall, and will also impact likely whether some of the parents will come back or not.
What are people hearing? Michelle is hearing the same. In Yakima County, we don't expect to be in person together for a while. We don't see us coming out of phase 1 anytime in the near future. They're planning for blended early learning programs in person for a small group of Tier 1 students, remote education and family support for Tier 2 students.
Katie, can you read more slowly, please?
Yeah, sorry. In Yakima County, we do not expect to be in person together for a while. We do not see us coming out of phase 1 anytime in the near future. We are planning for blended early learning programs in person for small group of Tier 1 students, remote education and family support services for Tier 2. Leela Mendez says the same there, and Cindy in Aberdeen is hearing the same. Bellevue is the same. Marcy Scott thinks K-5 should be in person and AB pattern for middle and high school. That is her opinion. I was just talking to our computer consultant. His wife is a first grade teacher, and she's trying to figure out how to do Zoom instruction for her first graders, and she completely would agree with you on that one, because I said, try for 4-year-olds.
Right.
So yeah. Yeah, Susan, I think it's interesting because there's a question here, embedded here, about whether we should be aligned with the schools and do the same kind of approach, or whether we are early learning and more aligned with childcare and have more of that approach. I don't think that the answer is obvious, or that it will be the same in all places. Other thoughts out there?
Yeah, Susan and Erica, I would just say, I mean, we are watching the school districts as well too, and trying to figure out what they're doing. I think as a major factor in helping us figure out what we're doing, but I mean, honestly, if they don't, I think not only will we have families not coming back, but we're really worried about workforce issues. Because if staff have kids at home, it's going to be really hard for us to get enough back in the building to open. So, you know, I was just talking to the regional office this morning and sharing, you know, that perspective. We also go with 2 districts, so we're trying to see what 3, Highline, Tukwila, and Seattle. And we have no idea if they're going to align. Seattle says they're going to tell us by June 19th, but that's all going to change by the fall. So yeah, we're watching all that, and I'm really hoping that a little bit more guidance comes out too as to what might qualify or count going forward for home-based services, because we are also talking about, with reduced classrooms, maybe moving some of our slots, like an LDO for heads, to, you know, that home base that you're doing virtually. We've heard from a lot of families. We've been doing our own separate COVID survey before WSA and the states came out.
Right. Hey, I forgive you, Erica.
Yeah, it's okay.
I got it from Region 9, so we had it, but it's been really interesting in that families are not clamoring to come back. They are very clearly saying that they don't want to come back. So we're also trying to use that. There's a few that do, but primarily there's a lot of fear. And honestly, with we serve refugees and immigrants, and we are finding a very interesting, what I thought I had not thought of, which is how much trauma for people who have emigrated to this country to escape war-torn countries. The demonstrations have brought out trauma that feels like uprisings in their country, and responses, perhaps by our president, that appear to match some of the authoritarian governments they came from. And so we're actually having families and home visitors, staff, say, well, I just want to go back to my country. It doesn't feel safe. So leaving their houses we're seeing as a struggle. So I don't know if that helps, Susan. I'm all over the board.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually it does, in the sense that I think what I am worried about is that the districts on either side of us. So I've actually asked the staff to tell me what the districts surrounding, because Seattle might decide to do one thing, but we have staff that are in Bellevue, Renton, Shoreline. Right. Depending on how that plays out, we're worried a little bit about staffing, but we're also just worried about, again, how kids will come back and how families will come back. So I echo your statement, but I also realize that all of these are going to have to get bargained, which was what Allison was highlighting at the statewide ELAC meeting. And it worries me if that's the case, because we may not get the outcome that we want, and a lot of inconsistency in how we're going to end up having to staff in the fall.
Yeah. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and there's some comments in here about, you know, different counties being in different phases and that having a big impact. Everybody's sort of in a wait and see at the moment. Yeah. All right, folks. Well, thank you for another great hour of COVID-19 Head Start ECAP meeting, and have a great week. If you are interested in talking about mental health support for classrooms and for children, please email me and let me know that you are willing to take a few minutes and talk to our partners. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah. I hope we see some of you on the call with Cleo too on Friday, the Migrant Seasonal Head Start Association. I think that'll be great. And Katie, just as a final reminder, don't you have an amazing summer institute coming up?
Yes, I'm about to go over to the Summer Institute and close some classes. So
wow, people better move fast.
That's right. All right.
Thanks. I'll see you, everybody. Bye. See you, Kevin.